How's it going, guys? Today I am going to be talking about something a little bit different. I'm not going through anybody's first match for this video. However, I am going to go through some of the earliest times in my career. Actually, it's kind of before my career. I'm going to be talking about the years that I started training. So we're going way back to when I first started training, how I got into it. I have loads of footage and I have loads of photos from way back early in my career. From like really early on, from when I was training.
Mark Andrews, I'm the Lightning Kid. I'm 16, just about to do my GCSEs. I'm training to be a professional wrestler.
I figured I might as well compile them and do like a little story talk through of the earliest times in my career. So let's start off back in 2005. I'm 12 years old and me and my friends from high school are super into wrestling, as every 12-year-old is, and we see that there's an advert for a local show ran by NWA Hammerlock, which is the UK strand of the National Wrestling Alliance, and they're performing down the road from me in Catay's Community Centre in Cardiff. So we go to this show, me and like 4 of my friends, and it's awesome. You know, it's just your bog standard local wrestling show, but it's wicked. Johnny Moss was on the show. Pretty sure Zack Sabre might have been on the show, but I can't really remember. But what I do remember is that after the show, me and my friends decided to get in the ring because we wanted to try 619s. We gave it a good shot, but they were all pretty terrible. And then a wrestler from backstage came out to tell us, you know, get out the ring, you're not allowed in the ring. However, tomorrow there is wrestling training here in Catay's Community Centre. Come along for 3 hours, pay £10. Learn to be a pro wrestler. So obviously this is the best news we could hear. This is the best day of our lives. I'm pretty sure I went home and watched the entire season 1 of Tough Enough to prepare myself for the first big day of training the next morning. So to give a bit of history to NWA Hammerlock, as I said, it was the UK strand of NWA. It was run by Andre Baker. It produced stars like Johnny Moss, Zack Sabre Jr., Jimmy Havoc, Finn Balor, or formerly known as Virgil Devitt. Becky Lynch, I believe, trained under NWA Ireland, which was a strand off of NWA Hammerlock. So loads of good names came out of there. However, this was the start of what would become NWA Wales. So I started training at NWA Wales. At the time, training was only on once a month. So on the first Sunday of every month, you'd show up to Catay's Community Centre. Occasionally there'd be a ring. If there was a ring, it was the old Transatlantic Wrestling Challenge ring, if anybody remembers that show. So during Hammerlock coming down to Wales and starting these training sessions, that kind of sprouted off into NWA Wales and Celtic Wrestling. So Celtic Wrestling started running regular shows in Catay's Community Centre. Catay's Community Centre became this little hub for local wrestling shows. And I remember being a massive fan of Celtic Wrestling when I first started training. My trainers at the time were Mike Bird and Ed Ferris, and they were on all the shows. And it just felt like this little wrestling scene. You know, you had a familiar roster, you had the same fans that came, there was a Celtic Wrestling forums. So the times that we didn't have a wrestling ring in training, we'd be training on these really thin blue mats on a wooden floor. A lot of it was chain wrestling, basic bumps. Fortunately for me though, NWA UK started holding these wrestling camps a few times a year. So I've been training once a month for about a year at this point, and then I nagged my parents to let me drive up to Kent and stay with a load of wrestlers for a week and learn how to wrestle in an actual ring. Luckily, my parents were really supportive throughout my wrestling career, so my dad drove me 6 hours all the way up to Kent. Loads of people from all across Europe came to these camps, so I met people from all across the UK, from Ireland, from Spain, Germany, Lithuania. All these guys travelled to Kent to learn how to become a pro wrestler. And I made some friends for life there, guys like Andy Wilde from Scotland, who now wrestles for ICW. And this was the first time that I met guys like Zack Sabre Jr., Jimmy Havoc. They took training throughout the week, along with guys like John Ryan, Paul Tracy, Psycho Steve, and my regular trainer Ed Ferris. I ended up going to about 5 of these camps in the space of 2 years between 2006 and 2008. And as you can see from some of this footage, I was still a long way away from being a pro wrestler. In the meantime, back in Wales, training became a more regular thing. We changed venues, we went over to Newport, we're in a leisure centre now, and even though we still didn't have a ring, the blue gym mats got a little bit better. Oh. Training was taken twice a week under Ed Ferris and Mike Bird. Even though I was only like 14, 15 years old, I'd been there the longest out of all the trainees, so I kind of felt like the little golden boy of the school. And this is the part where I meet Flash Morgan Webster and Wild Boar Mike Hitchman. So a group of about 5 or 6 guys start coming to training. They're from the valleys in Wales, and they are awesome. And let me quickly just say that if you want to become a pro wrestler these days, this is not the way to do it. There are tons of reputable schools all around the UK that train 4 or 5 times a week. Back then, it was a lot harder to find regular training, so this is what we resorted to. But these days, go to a school and do it the proper way. The rest of us are busting out some wrist locks and basic back bumps. These guys are busting out corkscrew moonsaults, package pile drivers. I have no idea where these guys have come from. Oh! So I add them on MSN, for anyone who remembers that, and I get talking to them about wrestling, and they send me some of their backyard wrestling music videos. my mind continues to be blown. These guys have built this backyard wrestling ring base out of tires and wood. They're smashing out crazy moves, crazy flips. And here's the thing, back in like 2006, 2007, backyard wrestling was not an okay thing to do in the professional wrestling world. So guys who backyarded would get slated by a lot of pro wrestlers, but equally, I was like 15 years old and not that many wrestling companies were okay with booking a legitimate child on their wrestling show. So on the down low, away from training, I didn't tell my trainers, I set up my backyard wrestling company, FPW. Fast-paced wrestling. Although backyard wrestling was looked down on at the time, this was a really good opportunity for me to get creative. I could practice everything I'd learned in training, I could polish things up. Also, because I was still a teenager, I had all the time in the world, so I could just practice my technique constantly and actually get better at wrestling in between training classes. This became a regular thing for me and my friends in high school. We managed to nick a few mats or carpet underlay from skips nearby, or make a ring base out of tires in my garden. You gotta remember as well that back in like 2006, the scene wasn't as thriving as it is today in the UK, so there wasn't really a lot of shows you could just go to and help out at. Shows, especially in Wales, were few and far between, so there really wasn't a lot going on at this time. So I was just trying to wrestle as much as I possibly could, you know, whether it was in training in Newport, whether it was going up to Kent to train up at Hammerlock, or whether it was backyard wrestling with my friends from high school. So it gets to November in 2006, and I make my debut on the first ever NWA Wales show with a fellow trainee, Sadistic Psycho. You can check out the match by here, actually, so head over and check that out now. It's not very good. Looking back on this card, though, it was actually pretty stacked. You had guys like Zack Sabre Jr. taking on Jimmy Havoc, you had Nick Aldis in the main event, and there was like 400 people in attendance, so I couldn't have asked for a better show to be a part of. Over the next year, I did 1 or 2 shows here or there, but they'd all be for like NWA Wales, or under the NWA Hammerlock name, or this one random show that I did in Spain on my 16th birthday that was ran by my friend Jorge, who I met at wrestling camp. That was actually awesome because I got to spend my 16th birthday in Madrid. And then, at some point in the summer of 2007, myself and another trainee from NWA Wales managed to get on a show in Coventry for PWA. And that is where I meet 12-year-old Tiger Kid, otherwise known as Pete Dunne. Along with the other man who would co-found Attack Pro Wrestling, Jim Lee, who wrestled under Helix. I became close friends with Jim and with Pete really fast because they shared the same love for pro wrestling and they were always so eager to do it as much as possible, just like I was. And because they were a similar age to me, they also struggled to get on shows because 1, there wasn't many shows around, and 2, we were still children, to be honest. So fast forward to 2008, I still want to wrestle as much as I possibly can, but I should probably start laying off the backyard wrestling because I don't want to seem unprofessional. I was still super eager to wrestle as much as I could though, so this is where I start looking on eBay for a cheap wrestling ring, hoping that one will miraculously show up for like £100 or less. And guess what? It actually did. Actually showed up for 100 quid. I accidentally typoed boxing ring, and there it was. Boxing ring. 10-foot boxing ring, low to the ground, £100 from Manchester. That's fate right there. I'd managed to save up money to buy it, and luckily having a super supportive dad again, he drove up to Manchester in his camper van, and we somehow managed to squeeze all the parts of this boxing ring into his camper van and bring it back down to Cardiff. So in my attempt to stop backyard wrestling, I then got in touch with Catay's Community Centre, which is where I used to train. So this is where we decided to start Fest. Fun events and sick times. So Pete and Jim would travel down from the Midlands, I'd get my backyard wrestling friends from high school, we'd set up the ring for a weekend, and we'd have Fest. Not gonna sit here and die, I'll follow through again this time, I'll swallow swords, spit out my pride, I'll be just fine. The first one was Christmas Fest, then we had Easter Fest, then we had Summer Fest. Essentially, we just spent 2008 and 2009 wrestling in a hall, in a tiny boxing ring, in front of our friends, just for the hell of it, and it was the best time of our lives. But honestly, it was actually the best. Like, this is where I did my first ever shooting star press. Look at this footage. It's like a 16-year-old Pete Dunne being a technical masterpiece in front of no one. We were super excited for these shows, you know, this was the time to bust out all the cool stuff we'd been working on. We'd make music videos afterwards, we'd share them around, but we still had to keep this kind of secret because we didn't want all the pro wrestlers to see us doing it and think we were unprofessional. Although now it's been like 15 years, so I don't really care. So throughout this time, we actually learned how to become better wrestlers. And then over time, we got more bookings on real wrestling shows. And eventually, there was just no need to set up the ring and do it because every single weekend, we'd be busy doing a show somewhere around the UK. Years later, Pete and Jim would set up Attack Pro Wrestling, which I then got involved in the organisation of. And we started running shows in Catay's Community Centre, but this time in front of a real crowd. And that venue now is quite a historic part of the British wrestling scene, really. We run regular Attack Pro Wrestling shows there, and it's still my favourite venue to wrestle in. But the origins of Attack Pro Wrestling is another story for another video. So there you have it, those were the early days of my wrestling training days. And the reason I wanted to make this video is because I think that might have been maybe the purest time in my entire wrestling career. We were all still in high school at the time, yet we were so eager to wrestle as much as possible. Whether that was in the back garden on a load of tyres, looking for a cheap boxing ring on eBay to one day hopefully buy, or renting out the local youth centre so you could set up the ring. It was just a very, very passionate time of our lives. And don't get me wrong, I still feel that passionate today, if not more so. But I think there's something really awesome and really special about a group of teenagers who would just wrestle in a field in front of no one, or wrestle in a hall in an old boxing ring in front of no one, but we still had the time of our lives doing it. Thanks for checking out the video though, guys. If this was something you enjoyed, then please tell me in the comments below. I'm sure loads of wrestlers have similar backstories about how their wrestling careers started, and I'd love to do more of these videos, so please comment below and say if you enjoyed it or not. If you do, I'll make more videos about more fun times in my career, and even if you didn't like it, please subscribe still, because I'm going to be releasing as many My First Match videos as I possibly can, but unfortunately at the moment with coronavirus, I'm not entirely sure how many I'm going to be able to do. But fingers crossed, there'll be some more new ones very soon. Cheers for watching, guys. Like, comment, subscribe.